That's also my friend Paul. And this is Dr. Chite. He's the one that actually started this. He's actually from Kenya and is the one responsible for starting all of this. And then, if these first 2 days weren't tough enough, I met another astounding woman named Maureen Maruka. And she's the one that really started the Hemophilia Society in Kenya. And she started it because she actually lost her first son to hemophilia. He was only 6 years old, and she had been told that he had hemophilia, but she had no idea what it really meant. And I'm not 100% sure how his bleed started, but he developed a mouth bleed, which doesn't seem super serious. But after days and days, it just kept bleeding and bleeding. She finally took him to the hospital in Nairobi, and they were like, "Oh, he'll be fine." They gave him, I actually don't think they gave him anything. He said, "Oh, it's just a tooth bleed. He'll be okay." And she kept saying, "No, he has something called hemophilia," but she couldn't really advocate enough because she didn't know herself what hemophilia was. So after a few more days of bleeding and bleeding, her son started to get very, very ill, very anemic. And finally, she took him back to the hospital and was, panicking, trying to get somebody to do something. And he just sat there in the hospital without being seen by anyone because they were like, "Oh, it's just a mouth bleed. He's fine," And eventually, somebody in Nairobi at a private hospital, she contacted him, and he knew a little bit about hemophilia, but they had no factor to treat him with. And by this point, he was very close to death, and they tried giving him FFP, but it was too late, and he passed away. And after that, Maureen was absolutely devastated, as you can imagine. But she was determined to have another son, and this time she would have people educated in Kenya, and she would do something about it. So she got in contact with Lori Kelly, and they've been able to get some factor from Lori Kelly, and now with this program, she's helping get treatment in Kenya. So after the symposium, my work really began in setting up the lab, and we brought this it's called a coagulometer. It's about this big. That's where you do all your factor testing, PT, PTTs, all of that. And we trained, it was about 16 people on how to use the instrument, how to, diagnose hemophilia with the instrument. And I think, we have Lisa here from the lab. It's not the easiest machine to use. It's very tricky to use. And so with 16 people, it was really hard to get a lot of hands-on experience, but they got the gist of how to use it. And we actually were able to diagnose 3 patients with hemophilia, one being Stephen. We actually took his blood and did a factor 8 level, and he was severe factor 8 deficient. Otherwise, to get diagnosed with hemophilia in Kenya, they actually have to draw a blood sample and send it all the way to South Africa, which costs hundreds of dollars, and most of these families can't afford it, so they won't even get tested. So our goals in the lab were to have them continue factor level testing so they could actually provide these levels for the caregivers. But in the reality, we had 16 people that trained, and no one felt comfortable enough to keep going. So very few results were done. But we went back, and this is my brief update that I put in yesterday. So we returned about 2 weeks ago for World Hemophilia Day, and they had hundreds of people show up, and we actually drew over 100 people with suspected hemophilia and ran factor 8 levels and 9 on every single one of them. So of the over 100 patients, I believe we had 70 confirmed people with hemophilia. Most of them have extreme joint damage already, and most of them had no idea if they had factor 8 or factor 9. one young boy we met, he had a completely crippled right knee and a crutch. He was basically stuck like this, and he was crutching around, and also had a really bad glute bleed that he could barely stand up straight. And his mother had told us that he got factor VIII before and he responded to it. So we assumed he had factor VIII deficiency, and as soon as he got there, we had some expired factor that we gave him. And, after 2 days of that, he didn't really seem to be getting much better. So we tested his level on Tuesday night, and he actually had severe factor IX deficiency. But these people had no clue. He had maybe gotten factor one time in his life, and he obviously responded better than he had with no factor, so she just didn't know. And she was so excited that her son finally got a treatment for his bleeding. And there were several of those people that we found that had said they were 8s, but they're actually 9. So they finally have a diagnosis and an actual level that the doctors can treat with. So back to my first trip. This is Stephen again. So as soon as we got there and found him in the hospital, they began treating him with factor VIII, some expired factor VIII that we got there. And after a week in the hospital is the picture on the left, and he had finally stopped bleeding and started recovering. And finally, after 2 weeks of being treated with factor VIII products, he actually was able to leave the hospital. So if we wouldn't have been there, he would have been dead for sure. And after 2 weeks of the proper care, he was actually finally able to leave the hospital. So after this amazing trip, an eye-opening trip, I got to go on my own adventure and flew to Kilimanjaro. This is my first sight of the mountain from the plane, which I wasn't too nervous until I actually saw it out of the plane, and it is gigantic. So Kilimanjaro is actually the world's highest freestanding mountain. So it's not a mountain in a range of mountains. It is by itself. It's actually a dormant volcano. And you can see the summit over that way, right over here. So pretty close to the same height as our plane was flying. So day one, we started at a hotel in a town called Arusha, and I know how to infuse before I started, obviously. And I don't know if it was because of the nerves or what, but I was a mess. I actually missed twice, which really made me even more nervous. I can't even infuse in a hotel room. How am I going to infuse on a mountain? But luckily, my uncle Dave, who had come with us to Kenya, we actually taught him how to infuse. He had no medical experience. We taught him to infuse at the place we were staying in Kenya. And he saved the day and actually infused me. I think he was pretty terrified as well. But it worked out. So the first day, they picked us up at the hotel. And it was probably the most tense drive I've ever had. We drove for about 2 hours from the hotel to the gate where we started our climb. And in this huge bus. And there was me and my uncle, about 10 porters, and then the 2 guides. And everybody was just completely silent. I was just, every bad thought was going through my mind, what am I getting myself into? Holy cow. That's our big bus over there. But then we finally got out and started hiking, and everything kind of calmed down from there. You start at about 5,000 feet, so Denver elevation, and then the first day you hiked 9,700 feet through a cloud forest, which is over here on the left. And it's absolutely beautiful. Just these huge ferns that grow over the trail and just giant trees, and it's pretty amazing. And then you hike through the cloud forest and end up just above it, and this is the picture off the side of that's out of my tent the first day. But really it it's a pretty calm hike. It's just like any hike here in Colorado. So I wasn't too worried after the first day. I actually think I got a little overconfident after the first day. The second day was also a very smooth day. It's kind of an interesting experience, especially for me and my uncle who like to go climbing a lot and usually carry our own gear. So in the morning, you wake up and the guides bring you tea in the morning, hot tea, and then you wake up slowly and go to the mess tent, and they have this beautiful hot meal, and a table. They carry a card table up. It's so crazy. It's so awkward. And me and my uncle are like, what are we doing? Like, I thought we were climbing a mountain. We were like, it's like a resort. So after the first day and kind of the awkwardness of that, we kind of fell into line, and you just start enjoying the scenery. So this is the first sight we had of the summit while we were hiking. So you can see it's pretty far away. And it's such a massive mountain. It's just huge. And it takes quite a while to get close to the summit. And then this is our camp from day 2. It's called Sheer Camp at about 12,000 feet. And that's just the sunset on the mountain. And now on the beginning of day 3, I was supposed to infuse. And I don't know if I should say this with Marilyn here. But I was supposed to infuse, but I was feeling pretty confident. It wasn't a very difficult climb. So I was like, I probably don't need to infuse. I'll just wait one more day and then, don't have to worry about it and only have to infuse once on the mountain. Well, that was a very bad idea. So for all of the younger kids with hemophilia here, don't do that. So day 3 is called, it was a climb high, sleep low day. So you climb from 12,000 feet up to about 15,000 feet and then back down and sleep low. And so that's supposed to help you acclimate to the high elevation. So we hiked up, and you can see it's kind of a crazy place. It looks like a kind of an alien world, like you're on Mars. Down here, no trees, no vegetation. And we got to the top of our climb high day, and there's this really cool pillar that's on the side of the mountain called Lava Tower. And our guide asks, hey, well, since you guys got up here, okay, do you guys want to try and climb Lava Tower? I was like, of course I do. So this is a picture of me climbing Lava Tower, and it's pretty good climb. I mean, you're using your hands and feet, and there are places that they could set up ropes, but it wasn't too dangerous. So we climbed up there, and it was great. And we spent a little time on the top with the clouds that roll in, so the view was kind of bad. So we started coming down, and as I took a big step down, I hooked my foot up on a rock, and I felt my quad just pull. And I was like, oh crap, this is terrible. Like, I'm at 15,000 feet on Kilimanjaro, and I just pulled a muscle. What's going to happen, So I kind of kept it to myself for a little while. I was like, maybe it just tweaked it, maybe it's going to be fine. I'll just pretend it didn't happen. Also, don't do that. So that's what I found out. Basically, I had a bleed. So we started walking down, doing the climb high, sleep low part, and we're hiking down, and I can start feeling it get a little tense, tight. And I still, in my mind, was like, oh, it's not a bleed, I'm fine. Oh, wrong way. But it wasn't. I actually slept that night at Bronco Camp, not infusing, because I don't know why. I just refused to believe it was a bleed. But I woke up the next morning in quite a bit of pain and a little bit of swollen quad, and knew that I had to infuse, and was quite worried that this trip would be over. The only problem with it being over is there's not really a way to get out of there with a bleed. You could climb back to the Shearer camp, the place we were last day, and there's actually a road that comes up there. But where we were, there wasn't really a good way to get off the mountain, and I didn't really want to go off the mountain. So I infused in my tent at 12,000 feet, which was new to me and pretty cool. And it went fine, which was a relief.